Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan. Today I'm very excited. I get to try a pretty special pour. This is the brand new Bombergers. I'm just looking at the color of this and I'm pretty excited. It's like a really deep mahogany. It's darker than I would expect a pour at this proof point to be. So I'm pretty jazzed about this one. It's been getting a lot of rave reviews. Normally we're used to getting the Bombergers and Shanks duo later in the year, but this is a special release, the Bombergers PFG. You might be like, what is PFG? What does that even stand for? Is it pretty friggin' good? Maybe. Maybe it is. I don't know yet. But it actually stands for Precision Fine Grain, and it has to do with the secondary barrel. So this is a Bombergers that has been finished in a secondary barrel. We don't know the age. You know, it's Kentucky Straight Bourbon is what it's labeled as. So we know it's at least 4 years old if it's non-age stated and straight bourbon whiskey. So at least 4 years of original maturation, probably more than that, and then finished in a secondary barrel. And this is the whole selling point of this bottle, right? By the way, big shout out to Mikey P who sent in a sample of his. So let's get into the specs of this real quick. It's 100.2 proof, 100.2, so just barely above that bottled in bond benchmark. And it's $140 is the MSRP for this bottle, which is, I mean, that's a fairly expensive bottle, but it's not outrageous. You know, we've got like $200 bottles out there these days and above. So 140 is pricey, but also somewhat reasonable. And the price point is a reflection of what went into making this product. So it's all about precision and this sort of custom work that's been done on this secondary barrel. Let me get into that secondary barrel real quick, and I will do some reading because it is a lot of information. I don't want to get it wrong, but basically it's like a French oak barrel, a toasted French oak barrel, but it's more than that, right? That's sort of the base description of what's happening in the finishing barrel, but it is more than that. So the master distiller at Michter's, this is what he says about it. It's a wonderful expression with great texture and a remarkable spectrum of rich, full flavors, resulting from our team's thoughtful exploration of wood science under very specific conditions. What are those specific conditions? Let's talk about that. So this secondary barrel is described as a custom, proprietary, toasted and charred French fine grain oak. And then not just that, but the oak came from like 4 different forests in France and then was specifically sent to a lumberyard to season, to air dry, basically to season the oak for 40 months minimum by a specific river in France. It's the Charente. I'm going to butcher it because I'm not French and I don't speak French, but it's like Charente, but you kind of need to say it really French-like, you know what I mean? Charente. It's kind of the back of the throat. Anyways, neither here nor there. I wish they would specify where on the river this lumberyard is, because this river undergoes a lot of elevation changes. So it starts just to the southeast of Civray, up in the highlands, and then it trickles. I mean, it kind of goes, it cuts north, and then it cuts south, and it comes down and empties into the Bay of Biscay, in the Atlantic. So it's a fairly long river, and there's a lot of other rivers that sort of empty into it as it makes its journey west. But it would be cool to sort of understand where on that river's journey this oak is being seasoned, because the elevation and climate changes can vary pretty dramatically along that river. So I don't know. Either way, they describe it as a custom proprietary barrel. And the word proprietary, what does that mean? Basically means think of it sort of like it's a patented thing. Like they have sort of creative rights to this thing. A lot of custom work went into its preparation, so it is sort of related to their brand now. And on top of that, they described it as a fine grain oak. What does that mean? Why does that matter? A fine grain oak, if you're not familiar with woodworking, means the rings are tighter together. It's usually, fine grain is usually comes from a tree that grew very slowly over time. It wasn't a rapid growth where the rings are really far apart, where in one season it grew a lot, and so you have a wider ring. It grows slowly, so the rings are packed together. So after one season, it goes here, and then after the next season, it goes here. Instead of going, 1 season, 2 season, 3 seasons. So you get tighter rings, very small pores in the wood itself. And it tends to be really uniform. So there's not a lot of variation in the wood, which makes it really good for looking at, right? Usually woodworkers like fine grain if they're going to have a really pretty finish on a piece of wood, furniture, or something like that. So, but anyways, less variation in the wood, so it's very controlled and precise, right? That's what this whole bottle is all about, right? It's precision, fine grain. Anyways, that's enough talk. That is a lot of talk, and one thing that's worth remembering, you might think, oh, that means this might probably going to be really, really good if it was specifically made to their preferences. But one thing worth remembering is that your preferences vary from my preferences, and my preferences might vary from their preferences. So this is like somebody's love child. Are you going to love this thing the same way they do? I don't know. Will I? I also don't know. Let's find out. Let's get in on it. Okay, it is heckin' oak forward. Oh, that's a beautiful nose. A lot of oak on the nose. There's also like this sarsaparilla kind of a note going on too, like that root soda. Very potent, even floral to an extent, alongside those rich caramels and vanillas that come from the wood. A little bit of a maple kind of a note going on too. But I think my favorite thing I'm getting off this nose, I just got back from a Caribbean vacation, and one night I had some pretty spectacular creme brulee. And this on the nose is reminding me a lot of that charred, caramelized sugar on the top of creme brulee, right? You got the custardy pudding underneath, vanilla bean, but then that charred layer of sugar on top of it that just has this slightly burnt, caramely flavor to it. I'm getting a lot of that on the nose too. Beautiful nose. Let's try it, huh? Cheers. That was pretty good. It has a spice quality to it. Not spicy like hot spicy, but a spice like opening up a fresh spice cabinet and letting the aromas of cinnamon and clove and nutmeg sort of waft over you. It tastes like the smell of a really cool mom and pop antique store, right? That has tons of history to it. But I will say that secondary barrel is the star of this sip. Okay, those traditional bourbon-y notes, your vanillas and your caramels, they're there, but they are like supporting cast, right? They are not the feature performance. That French oak medley is the star of this show. A little bit of brown sugar, lots of those baking spices, and that sarsaparilla note is pretty consistent from start to finish of this sip. But the finish is this long, drawn-out tannic oak with a little bit, a hint of sweetness to it, a little brown sugar sweetness. It finishes longer than I would expect something at basically 100 proof to finish. And it also has that spice quality to it that is a little bit more potent than I would expect from 100 proof as well. I think this punches above its weight class in terms of its specs. That second barrel, the presence of it, its influence on this sip cannot be understated. You know, one of my concerns, like my worries going into this sip, was that secondary barrel, they put so much work into it, some effort into it. I was worried that it would just be sort of just kind of there, lightly enhancing the Bomberger's bourbon. But I think this secondary barrel really justifies all the effort that went into it, and it contributes more than just a little bit to this sip. It's the predominant feature. So if you wanted like a real French oak experience, this pour is for you. So I think it gets high marks for creativity, right? Innovation. I think understanding what went into the sip, what went into crafting this experience specifically, really enhances the experience as well, rather than just sipping it and not knowing. Be like, oh, this is Bomberger's. Oh, that's pretty good. You know what I mean? I think understanding the craftsmanship that went into it makes you appreciate the sip even more. If I were to nitpick, I would say that the one thing I do want is a little bit more of that bassy caramel or molasses, profile in there, so that the wood, the French oak, has something to sort of play off of. Maybe a duo, I don't know why I did this. It looked like I was doing something else when I did that, which is weird. Sometimes you don't know what to do with your hands. But it was just sort of a duo performance where they could play off of one another, right? A really solid bourbon, really solid finishing barrel, having a dual performance here. But it really is just a solo performance. So if I could nitpick, that's what I would say. I want a little bit more of that bassy bourbon action going on this sip that secondary barrel could play off of. Other than that, this is pretty spectacular, and I really enjoy this. Yeah, I think if I were to give this a score per my scale, it would have to fall. I think I'm going to give this a flat. No, I'll go a little bit. I'll go a little above it. 8.1. I'm going to give it an 8.1, right? Which is pretty high marks for me. Like I said, the only other thing that I think would elevate this further is if it had a little bit more of a well-rounded nature to it, instead of being kind of solitary in its experience it's delivering. It's a very pointed, which to be fair, is how they branded it. It is a very precise, pointed experience they're trying to deliver, and they did deliver it. But I also have to sip as a consumer and say, how much do I enjoy it? I think it's fantastic, and I really like the experience they did deliver. But if it's going to be a 9 or a 10 or something like that, I would want a little bit more of a well-rounded quality to the sip. So it could be a whole package instead of a pointed experience. But this is what they wanted it to be, and they executed really, really well. So 8.1 from me. I recommend it. I do. I think it's if you ever see it on a shelf, you got to buy it, right? Thanks again, Mikey, for sharing a sip from your bottle. I really appreciate your generosity, brother. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like on it and let me know, as it's the best free way to support the content right here on YouTube, and consider subscribing for additional whiskey content. Also, we have a private Discord for our channel. Wonderful people in there, swapping samples, helping each other hunt down the bottles that they're after, all that stuff. Sometimes we even do bottle shares with each other and virtual events, and that's a lot of fun too. I really enjoy the camaraderie in that community. So feel free to join and see if it's your cup of tea, if we're your kind of people. You can join it for free. If you want to take it to the next level, you can always join the Patreon group and get in the Patreon lounge. The base tier is literally $1. It's practically free. Anyways, links to that in the description. With that, I say cheers, my friends. May you live richly and get better with age, and hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.